Hello and welcome to Firstpost Live, where we bring you the day's top 4 stories from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. Let's begin with the headlines. India approves a plan worth over $800 million to boost rare earth magnet production to cut dependence on Chinese imports, as demand is projected to double by 2030. US President Donald Trump claims South Africa will be barred from the 2026 G20 in Miami, repeating false white genocide allegations in a social media post. Guinea-Bissau military officers declare total control and suspend the presidential election after rival candidates both claimed victory. The country's president has been arrested and borders have been shut after the coup. Venezuela revokes operating permits of major international airlines as they suspend flights, accusing them of acting on US pressure over regional military warnings. And French President Emmanuel Macron is set to announce the return of voluntary military service, nearly 30 years after conscription was scrapped, citing rising security threats from Russia. Today, we begin with an act of violence that unfolded just blocks away from the White House, an attack that officials are calling a targeted ambush on 2 West Virginia National Guard members. The shooting happened on Wednesday afternoon, on one of the busiest travel days of the year ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday. Authorities say the 2 Guard members were on what's known as a high-visibility patrol when a man rounded a corner and opened fire without warning. The Metropolitan Police said the attack appeared to be deliberate. After an exchange of gunfire, other Guard troops subdued the shooter, who was also injured. Both soldiers were immediately rushed to local hospitals in a critical condition.
We're here to brief you on the tragic events that happened today at approximately 2:15 local time in Washington, D.C., where 2 of our brave members of the National Guard and the Department of War were brazenly attacked in a horrendous act of violence. They were shot. They're in critical condition.
Within hours, officials identified the suspect. His name is Rahmanullah Lakanwal, a migrant from Afghanistan who entered the United States in 2021 and had been living in Washington state. Law enforcement agencies are still working to fully confirm his background, and so far, investigators believe he acted alone, but his motive remains unclear.
On a somber note, we had, and some of you may have seen this on your phones or on social media, but apparently there was a shooting outside the White House just a couple of hours ago. And we're still learning everything. We still don't know the motive. There's a lot that we haven't yet figured out.
The suspect's Afghan origin immediately pushed the story into charged political territory. And President Donald Trump called the shooting an act of terror, branding the suspect as an animal. The president, who was in Florida at the time of the attack, emphasized that the man was a foreigner from quote-unquote hellhole Afghanistan. He linked the attack to immigration, national security, and the legacy of America's longest war.
This heinous assault was an act of evil, an act of hatred, and an act of terror. It was a crime against our entire nation. It was a crime against humanity.
Witnesses described chaos at the scene, saying they heard rapid gunfire as shattered glass covered the roadway.
I was headed to get lunch, and I got up to 17th and I Street and was going to take a right. And as soon as I got up 17th and I Street, we heard like rapid gunshots. So myself and other people started to run back down I Street. There were also like a UPS truck that like was speeding by too. And we got about halfway down I Street towards 18th, and we stopped because everything was quiet. So we thought maybe it was construction going on, though it certainly didn't sound like that.
The attack also intensified scrutiny of President Trump's broader domestic strategy. For months, his deployment of National Guard troops to cities across the country, including Los Angeles, Memphis and Washington, has sparked lawsuits and protests from locals and leaders who argue the president is overreaching. In the aftermath, the White House briefly went into lockdown as federal and city agencies flooded the surrounding blocks. West Virginia's Governor, Patrick Morrisey, first announced that the soldiers had died, but later retracted that statement, citing conflicting reports about their condition.
Earlier today, 2 West Virginia National Guardsmen were brazenly shot in Washington, D.C. This was an act of unspeakable violence. Our hearts, our thoughts, our prayers go out to the brave service members, their families, and the units who are enduring this terrible tragedy.
And soon after the incident, the Trump administration ordered 500 additional National Guard members to Washington. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the president personally asked him to reinforce the city's security posture.
We will secure our capital, we will secure our cities. In fact, this happened just steps away from the White House. It will not stand. And that's why President Trump has asked me, and I will ask the Secretary of the Army, to the National Guard, to add 500 additional troops, National Guardsmen, to Washington, D.C.
As investigators work to determine what drove this attack, Washington is left grappling with a chilling question. What does it mean when soldiers deployed on American streets become the targets themselves? For now, the nation's capital remains on high alert, and the country is once again confronting the intersection of security, immigration, and politics, a crossroads that is shaping the national conversation in real time. Keeping our focus on the DC shootings, US President Trump is using the incident to double down on one of the most hardline priorities of his administration. That's immigration. This time, immigration from Afghanistan, a nation the US invaded in response to the 9/11 attacks and remained there for over 2 decades, leaving a trail of devastation and humanitarian tragedies. In a brief video statement, President Trump said the suspect involved in the attack was a foreigner who entered the US from Afghanistan. Then he shifted the focus away from the event itself and towards a broader policy push, ordering a full-scale review of the entry of Afghan citizens into the United States. Trump linked the shooting suspect's arrival to the 2021 evacuation mission from Afghanistan, when US forces finally left the country. Following that, the Taliban took over Kabul after ousting President Ashraf Ghani's government. Referring to the US evacuation process from Afghanistan as those infamous flights, Trump claimed the previous Biden administration allowed dangerous individuals to enter without adequate vetting.
As President of the United States, I am determined to ensure that the animal who perpetrated this atrocity pays the steepest possible price. I can report tonight that based on the best available information, the Department of Homeland Security is confident that the suspect in custody is a foreigner who entered our country from Afghanistan, a hellhole on earth. He was flown in by the Biden administration in September 2021 on those infamous flights that everybody was talking about. Nobody knew who was coming in. Nobody knew anything about it.
And this set the stage for his next move, a call to re-examine every single immigrant who has entered the country from Afghanistan under the Joe Biden administration.
We must now re-examine every single alien who has entered our country from Afghanistan under Biden, and we must take all necessary measures to ensure the removal of any alien from any country who does not belong here or add benefit to our country. If they can't love our country, we don't want them. America will never bend and never yield in the face of terror.
US Citizenship and Immigration Services announced an immediate suspension of all immigration processing for Afghan nationals. This means a freeze on asylum claims, green card applications, work permits, family reunifications, and long-pending humanitarian cases. The agency said the halt would remain until a new review of security and vetting protocols is completed. For thousands of Afghan evacuees still navigating the US immigration system, the announcement throws their future into uncertainty. Many had already gone through one of the most extensive background screenings applied to any migrant group entering the United States. Advocacy groups are pushing back. A group which helped resettle evacuees after the US withdrawal said Afghans undergo some of the most extensive security vetting of any migrants. It warned against using an isolated and violent act to stigmatise a whole community. And with Afghan processing frozen and a full review underway, the political and human impact of these decisions will unfold over the coming weeks, as debates intensify over who gets to enter America, who gets to stay, and on what terms. Moving on to our next story. A Hong Kong neighbourhood is reeling after a catastrophic high-rise fire. Dozens are confirmed dead, hundreds are still missing, and the death toll may rise. Entire homes have been destroyed, and countless families are facing the fear of losing their loved ones. The first fire broke out on Wednesday afternoon in Hong Kong's Tai Po neighbourhood, quickly turning into a deadly inferno. Authorities confirm that at least 55 people have died, including a 37-year-old firefighter who lost contact with his team. More than 56 people are in hospital, with some in a critical condition. City officials say hundreds were reported missing, though firefighters have since managed to reach some of them. The blaze swept through Wang Fuk Court, a huge housing estate consisting of 8 towers, each 31 floors high, with over 1,900 residential units in total. The flames first caught the bamboo scaffolding placed on the towers for repair work. Investigators now believe the fire spread so fast because of flammable materials left at the construction site, including packaging foam, bamboo, netting and plastic sheets. These materials fueled the flames and then rapidly jumped from one building to another, helped by strong winds and falling debris. The blaze had been largely brought under control by the morning, according to the Fire Services Department. The fire extinguishing work is expected to last until Thursday evening. Firefighters said the temperatures inside some flats were so high that they were unable to reach people who had called for help. Evacuations continue, with hundreds of residents moved to temporary shelters.
To extinguish the fire and rescue trapped residents, the Fire Services Department deployed over 140 fire engines and more than 60 ambulances. Over 800 firefighters and paramedics were mobilized, and drones were also used to assess the disaster scene. I have instructed the Fire Services Department to mobilize all necessary resources and manpower to put out the fire at full speed.
Residents say they were taken completely by surprise. Many flats had windows sealed due to maintenance work, leaving people trapped inside without realising there was an ongoing fire. Over 900 residents have now been shifted to emergency shelters, many still unsure whether they will ever see their homes again.
I live on the Block 1. I thought the fire from Block 3 would not spread so fast. My dog was at home, so I thought of coming back and bring the dog down from the apartment. It was just around 5 p.m., and the police would not let me up. The fire was not yet burning at our building. I do not know how my dog is doing upstairs now.
In the early hours of Thursday, police arrested 3 men from the construction company involved. Officers say the men acted with gross negligence, leaving flammable materials that caused the fire to spiral out of control. Hong Kong's anti-corruption agency also announced that it had opened an investigation into the renovation work carried out at the housing complex. A wider criminal probe is now underway.
Around 2 a.m, we arrested 3 men from Tai Po and Gao Tau Kok, San Po Kong, on suspicion of manslaughter.
Fire crews have been working since Wednesday afternoon. Evacuations are still happening. Parts of a major highway have been shut, and teams are using cranes and long-range hoses to cool the upper floors. Hong Kong is one of the world's most densely packed cities, over 7,000 people per square kilometre, and has around 570 buildings taller than 150 metres, more than any city globally. With millions living in vertical towers, any fire carries massive risks. This inferno has now become one of the city's worst modern disasters. As investigators examine how this disaster unfolded, Hong Kong is left counting the cost of a mistake that has taken lives, destroyed homes, and shaken an entire community. This is a tragedy that will leave its imprint for years to come, with families now grappling with loss, uncertainty, and the painful task of rebuilding their lives. We will continue to follow developments as the investigation progresses. And our final story comes from Indonesia, as the archipelago nation is grappling with a major humanitarian emergency after being hit by an earthquake amidst unrelenting monsoon rains that unleashed deadly floods and landslides across Sumatra. Earlier today, a 6.6 magnitude earthquake shook the region, triggering panic and further straining emergency crews who are still scrambling to assess aftershock risks. With communication lines down in several districts and rescue teams spread thin between quake-related damage and widespread flooding, local officials say the compounded impact is making response efforts significantly harder. The situation in Indonesia is rapidly escalating, with the death toll now at 28 and many more reported missing. For days, torrential downpours have battered North Sumatra, forcing rivers to overflow and triggering mudslides that swept through entire communities, with villages smothered by mud, boulders and uprooted trees. Rescue teams on the ground are calling it one of the toughest operations in recent years. Access to many areas is completely cut off, as roads have been destroyed and bridges washed away. In Sibolga, located in the west coast of North Sumatra, the city hardest struck by flooding, officials confirmed multiple deaths. Emergency crews have recovered bodies and rescued survivors from collapsed structures, but their work is being slowed by continued rainfall. 6 landslides in the area have levelled at least 17 homes so far. The city's police chief said temporary shelters are being set up and residents living near precarious slopes are being urged to evacuate immediately. He also warned that ongoing rainfall may trigger more landslides, putting further lives at risk. Dramatic footage shows families climbing onto rooftops with children as raging floodwaters swallow entire neighbourhoods. The National Disaster Mitigation Agency says up to 8,000 people have now been evacuated across North Sumatra, with aid being airlifted by helicopter to the hardest hit areas. Heavy seasonal rains between October and March are common in Indonesia, but officials say this year's extreme weather. The country's meteorological agency said a new storm, Cyclone Senya, developed on Wednesday, a system they caution could unleash further extreme weather over parts of Indonesia in the days ahead. Indonesian authorities are now racing against time to reach those still trapped. The wider region is also reeling. Thailand and Malaysia have reported dozens of deaths this week alone, with water levels so high that even hospitals have been submerged. The country is bracing for what could be a dangerous cascade of extreme events. Stay with us for further updates on this developing story. That's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thanks for watching.